During the autumn months, I like to use as many different kinds of apples as I can in my cooking. I like to make pies and tarts and chunky apple butters and fritters too. But I also like to use them in some savory dishes like a butternut squash and apple soup or sautéed with cabbage. And as you know, apples pair very nicely with, and today I'd like to show you a slightly different kind of variation on a more traditional theme. Loin like this, tenderloin, weighs about 10 ounces, and it's the perfect choice for a quick cook meal. This cut of meat is small, it's not too thick, and it cooks very quickly. And it really needs very little trimming. There's not a lot of fat on it. This would only cook up to be a little bit of a tough coating on a tender cut of meat. Take off as much of it as possible. So here we have pretty nicely trimmed tenderloin. You can ask your butcher for this nice cut of meat, and notice how it is nice and thick all along up till about here, and then it kind of tapers off. So what you want to do is even out the meat by tucking under that tail a little bit, and then we're going to just quickly tie the loin so that it holds its shape during cooking. We're going to first brown it in the pan a little bit, and then we're going to finish it off for about 10 minutes in the oven. About 25 years ago, when I first bought my house on Turkey Hill Road in Westport, Connecticut, the first thing that my husband and I did was to plant an orchard. And we didn't even own the property. We had to ask the owners, they were two maiden sisters. We had to ask them for permission to plant the trees before the closing because it was, I think, like early spring, and we wanted to get the trees in the ground at the right time. So we planted about 25 apple trees, and I've taken really good care of those trees, and they are providing me on an annual basis with bushels and bushels and bushels of apples. They are the heirlooms that you read about, and they're very nice, but they do require a certain amount of pruning. These are semi-dwarf trees, so they are about 10 feet tall, and they are on a very strong old rootstock. And I got them from a man out in Long Island called Henry Luthart. He was known at the time for his nice selection of heirloom varieties. Okay, so see, now I have my loin nicely tied up. And I must say, I have enjoyed those apples so very much. In the bowl here, we have quite an assortment of russets and Jonathans and Jonagolds and McCowans and some old-fashioned Macintosh. So we're ready to take this lovely loin and saute it in a heavy-bottomed skillet. It's nice to use these heavy skillets. We want approximately a tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of unsalted butter. And while the butter is melting, I want to cut some of these delicious-looking apples in half crosswise. This looks really nice. And you can take off a little bit of the top and a little bit of the bottom so that you can get them cooking evenly. Don't be afraid to mix apples. It's the time of year that you can really taste the difference, and they are delectable. And you can just add your tenderloins to that melted butter and oil, and you can put your apples generally, it's a half an apple per person. And these two loins will serve 6 people, about 2 minutes per side. In another skillet, melt 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. And when that melts, we're going to add a half a medium head of red cabbage that's been shredded as you would for coleslaw. See what nice color the meat gets? And the apples are starting to smell very nice. As the meat is browning, make sure that you haven't forgotten to heat your oven to 400 degrees. And now it's ready to transfer right into the oven for about 10 minutes. The internal meat temperature has to be about 145 degrees for medium. And now we have our butter melted. We add our cabbage. You can add a little bit of salt to the cabbage. And we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of apple cider and 1/2 teaspoon of caraway seeds. Bring this to a boil and simmer for 6 to 7 minutes. Now I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar just to finish off that beautiful red cabbage. Look how nice and soft it's become, but it still has its texture and it still has that amazing color. And now that the cabbage is all done, I think the must be done too. Looks good. Apples look tender. They've actually burst a couple of them, which is pretty nice. Now check the temperature. The thermometer should read 145 degrees. It looks great. Now remember, meat tends to continue cooking a little bit upon removal, so I'm going to lift these out to a cutting board and just let them sit here while I get the platter ready. The apples can be placed right on a serving dish. They look so good. So here we have some gorgeous apples. And now all these drippings will become the sauce. And we're going to deglaze the bottom of the skillet with 1/2 cup of apple cider. Deglazing really is taking the roasting juices from the bottom of the pan, loosening them with a liquid. It could be a wine, it can be a broth. We just want to reduce this by 1/2. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of cider vinegar. 1. You want to boil it for 1 minute to get rid of the strong taste of the vinegar. And now for our platter, we can just cut off the string. And you see how evenly this tenderloin cooked because we took the time to tie it up. The cabbage is a gorgeous color. And there's plenty here for 6 people. And now we want to slice the meat. You can slice on the diagonal. Now you can just put your roast on top of the cabbage and place your apples around the platter. And pour your lovely sauce right atop the meat. A perfect quick cook meal, and it only took a very few minutes.
A regal apple dessert from a 4-star chef, coming up next.